Hi, you guys. My name's Emma Jordan, and for my unit plan, I did it on 8th grade science, and the topic we covered was genetics. It was the first week of genetics, so there's a lot of introduction in what I'm doing, and there's a lot of fun activities as well. But what the students will learn about the growth, development, and the reproduction of genetics. They will also learn about the history of genetics and how we got here and who got us here. So who founded genetics, which was Gregor Mendel, by the way, if you guys didn't know. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this in the list of objectives that we needed. So for the first one was taxonomy of objectives, which was Bloom's taxonomy. And I'm going to be honest, I really struggle with this, and I still struggle with this a little bit, figuring out how to ask higher order questions, figuring out what's the best way to get the students to learn on their own and not me telling them everything. So I struggled and I changed and I asked the students to analyze more and explain why. So throughout this, instead of just asking a simple question, I would ask them, like, for example, let me show you. Okay, so on day 3, we had to graph the dominant and recessive traits in the class. So this was a really fun activity for the students. It got them all really excited to learn about themselves, to figure out what trait they had that was dominant versus their friends who was recessive. It was a really fun class. So in order to bring some analytics into this, what I did was I had them graph the traits in the class. So they would graph all of their traits in the class, and they would see which trait in that class was the most dominant, which was the most recessive, why it was that way. So in here I asked them to explain to me why it was the way that it was. And so what that meant was they have to pull data from the graph. They would have to say, well, 16 students have brown hair, so that means that brown is a dominant trait in this class because that's what everybody shows, is brown hair. So they'd use a little bit of analytics, and I asked them why and to explain and to analyze. So I was staying up on the remember category for a while, and then now I'm going down to analyze and critical thinking, because as a lot of you might know, memorization is not all there is to learning, and I've memorized really well in my life, but you don't always know things when you memorize. So I'm trying to get them away from that. So I incorporated Bloom's taxonomy throughout this. I edited, changed questions. Yeah, so then next we have multiple intelligences. So there's different types of intelligences and there's different types of learners, as we all know. There's interpersonal, spatial, naturalistic. Naturalistic is huge for science, and I'm so excited to have my own classroom and be able to do labs outside. It's one thing to look at a picture of a leaf and to label it and know all the parts. It's another thing to see a leaf in person and get to see the parts with your eyes, or to see an insect and get to see, okay, this is what the shell actually looks like. This isn't just a picture. Or in 8th grade science, they don't do anatomy, but if I were to do high school, they could physically dissect a cat. That's what we did in high school. And it was so much easier to physically touch these things and know, okay, this is where it's supposed to be. So I'm really excited for the naturalistic part, to go outside and get the students outside and thinking. Musical sounds. So for music, I didn't put this in my unit plan, but what I'm going to do and what I've seen work really well is teachers playing music at the beginning of class when they walk in, and then they play music at the end of class when they're wrapping up. So the music goes on for as long as it takes the students to do the bell ringer, and then it stops and then class begins. And then at the end, when the students are doing their exit slip, we'll play the music again to wrap their thoughts up, to calm them down, to bring them back into learning so they can really focus their thoughts on science and not everything else going on in the middle school world. And then there's logical and mathematical. So mathematics kind of goes hand in hand with science. You do need to know some kind of math to be able to do well at science. An example of that is in my graph. You have to be able to know, okay, there's 16 people. So that means there's 16 people with this dominant trait. You got to know how to use math to analyze science. So that's why a lot of times people that are good at math are good at science. Existential, tackling the questions of why we live and why we die, and interpersonal, sensing people's feelings and emotions. So interpersonal goes really well, and I plan to use this in my class a lot. I plan to try to get people to have those skills. It goes also with tier 5 on Maslow's hierarchy. And this is why we focus on building up our classmates instead of tearing them down. So in a little bit, I'll go and explain the tiers that I have, but my class, I want it to be anti-bullying. I don't want any bullying. I don't want anyone to be mean. I want everyone to feel they can speak their mind. And so I think this will be a really great way to incorporate this throughout my lessons, just with the positivity constantly and like getting on top of students. No bullying. You can't bully. That's just not allowed here. This is a space where everyone can feel safe, and I'm not going to have somebody tearing it down. Okay, so then there's also different learning styles. As we all know, auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and then there's multiple. So if you can read, you like reading better, you like writing. So for the learning styles, I've put multiple learning styles in almost each of my formative assessments. So not formative assessments, each of my lessons. So that way they could see different styles. I changed that a lot, actually. Okay, so just for day 4, for example, I had 3 superheroes on the board, and I asked the students to complete a learning target asking about how superheroes got their powers. For a formative assessment question, I also asked them, why do they think they got their powers? So they couldn't just say mutation. They had to explain it, which was really cool to see their explanations for the reasons that they thought. I really liked that. So that was fun. They got to see superheroes. I also played superhero music that day. So there was one musical auditory thing. They're getting their minds in the superhero thought. Who would know it would lead into genetics and mutations? But they really liked this lesson. So for this, I created a PowerPoint. I had to speak on this because you had to have the different types of mutations, and we had to know what they were for, what they were good for. So I had a PowerPoint, and it also had little pieces of pictures of different mutations, different kinds, so they could physically see the mutations. And then the next day, what I did was I had an ed puzzle on the mutation. So for those of you who don't know, an ed puzzle it's like a video, and then there's questions where it stops where you can follow along. It's kind of, I can't think of the other thing that it's like, but it's really cool, and the students really like it, and I really like it because it makes sure that they're paying attention, and it has video clips. So it has a little bit of everything. It has sound, it has visual, and it's a really great example. So I have multiple times in here where I get to do that as well. So that's pretty exciting. And then for hierarchy of needs, I'm going to go over what I have in here for that. All right, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow theorized that each student needs to meet their fundamental needs before they can grow and develop as an adult. So obviously he listed different tiers and different ways that those needs can be met before they can move forward. So for tier 1, thank you, Carlos, so much for this example. I loved watching you do it, and it was super easy to put into my lesson in a way to show that I'm following Maslow's hierarchy of needs in my classroom. So for tier 1, I will have a water bottle and a snack station at the back of my classroom where students can go up and grab a water or a snack without asking me. I want my students to feel comfortable and safe in my classroom. I will allow students to use the restroom without interrupting the class. I trust them when they say they have to go, so unless they abuse this privilege, I will allow students to just give me a look, take the pass, and head to the bathroom. For tier 2, I will have a suggestion box where students can leave a good or a bad thing from the lesson and give me tips on how it would be easier for them. I'll also have a bully box where students can put their needs in there that they want me to address but are too afraid to come forward. I'll also have a worry box. This is where students can drop their worries for the day in the class, and they can leave it at the door. So if you have a big test in 5th period, but I have you 2nd period, you can put that test we can write out the worry. It feels good to write it down, put it in the box, and then when you leave the class, you can pick up the worry, or you can leave it at the door. So you can pick up the worry on the way out, but when you're in my classroom, I want you to be focused on science and nothing else. So that would be awesome. Tier 3, students will work in groups every single day. There will be many times when they are working alone, but I want to strengthen their bonds in the classroom and teach them how to be effective communicators. I will not allow students to pick on or make fun of anyone in the class, like I said before, even if it is just a joke. My class will be a free space where anyone can say anything, and nobody's going to criticize them because there are no stupid questions, only stupid answers. Just kidding. So tier 4, students will constantly be communicating with each other in class. I will have 2 group projects a year where they will have to present and look nice and do everything you need to do for a college presentation. This way the students can get prepared for job interviews, for interviews into college, multiple different things. They can get practice using their communication skills in front of an audience. Students will also give positive feedback and encourage one another to build their self-esteem. I will also have a student of the day where students write little notes about what they like about that student. I have seen this in elementary and it works wonders. Imagine what it can do for prepubescent teens that really need some self-esteem boosters. Tier 5, I will work with the students on how to grow and be mindful of things going on in their surroundings. I will watch for changes in students and remind them of how little changes do not go unnoticed. I will support their growth every day, and I will always let them know that I am on their side. So for conditioning, what I have learned about conditioning, what I have seen in my field experience, what I have seen when I've been observing is positivity goes a long way. It does way more for a person to be positive to them and reward the good behavior instead of constantly dogging on somebody and saying, come on, get out your Chromebook. Come on, get out your Chromebook. Why are you not following along? Why are you talking? Why are you getting out of your desk? Instead, I can say, hey, Sarah, thank you so much for coming into class and getting out your Chromebook. I really appreciate it. I didn't really think about candy, but then I sat down and thought about it. Middle schoolers love candy, and it's a great way to get them participating. I can just throw them a piece of candy if they're listening and they can catch it. Another really cool thing for kinesthetic, I cannot say it, is having a ball, the speaking ball. So when we're doing group discussions, you can only talk when you have that ball, which this helps students feel more confident, because I know when kids are talking, while students talking, sometimes they get quieter and they get nervous, like thinking that they're talking about them. So this way, when they have the ball, that's the only time they're allowed to talk. And they have to be alert and be listening, because they never know when the ball's going to come to them, because it's totally random. So that's a really fun way to get students learning and moving around as well. So for conditioning, I will put a lot more emphasis on rewarding the students instead of punishing them. One good idea would be Free Seat Friday, where they can choose their seats based on their behavior for the week. This really works well, and they love it. On Fridays, they're so upset if they didn't get it, and then the next week they behave insanely better because they know that they can sit by their friends on Friday. Candy. And then another way that I'm really excited to reward my students is with funny meme stickers. I've seen that all over TikTok, and I'm really excited to do that for my students because they love memes. I love memes. It's a way for me to communicate with them and let them know that I see their hard work and that they're working hard. So then for the last thing that I want to address is the zone of proximal development and cognitive development. So for the zone of proximal development, it is the difference in what a student can do independently and what they can do with the focus group. So if they can do something, it's too easy, they're not learning. And then on the other side, they can't do it, it's too hard, they're not learning. And the zone of proximal development is right in the middle where the most learning takes place. It's guided learning. It's focused learning based off of what they know. We're pushing them a little bit further than that. So this is why group work is so important with the teacher walking around. So my students will be working on something that I explained, and I'll be walking around guiding their discussions. But this is why group work is so important, because the students learn from each other so well, and they can get really good examples from each other without me having to do all of the learning. They can do most of it on their own, and I can come around and do checks to make sure everything's going the way that it should be going. So yeah, I'm really excited to be a teacher and to actually teach this. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm looking forward to reading all of your guys's as well. So thank you and have a great day.